When love turns into control, how Stoicism helps you break free from jealousy, fear, and emotional prison. Have you ever noticed how the people most afraid of being controlled often try to control others? Or how those who fear abandonment the most are sometimes the ones who suffocate the people they love? There's a silent trap hidden in many of our relationships, a cycle where fear breeds attachment, and attachment disguises control as love. It's hard to admit, but often we are both victims and enforcers in the emotional dynamics we create. We are the prisoner and the jailer. Have you ever checked your partner's phone? Felt anxious when they didn't reply quickly? Got jealous of something that wasn't even a real threat? That impulse to control, to monitor, to demand, to chase reassurance often looks like care on the surface. But underneath, it's fear. It's insecurity. And unless we learn to confront it honestly, we become trapped in our own minds, constantly looking outward for peace we can only find within. Stoicism offers a radical shift. Instead of controlling others, control yourself. Instead of watching external behavior, observe your internal reactions. It calls you to face the truth without illusions, because when fear of loss dominates your heart, love is no longer freedom. It becomes a cage. In this video, we're going through the mirror, not to judge, but to understand. Not to blame, but to take responsibility. You'll see how Stoic wisdom can help uncover the roots of emotional control, expose the poison of jealousy, and guide you to a love rooted in virtue, not in fear. This isn't about blaming yourself or others. It's about awakening. It's about reclaiming your peace, your clarity, your freedom from within. Are you ready to go deeper? Because today, maybe for the first time, you'll realize that in many moments of your life, you were both the prisoner and the jailer. The most dangerous prison isn't made of bars or chains. It's built slowly inside your mind, with bricks of fear, cemented by insecurity, and locked by past wounds that were never healed. When we talk about control in relationships, we often think of the other person, the jealous partner, the possessive figure, the emotionally dominant one. But rarely do we turn the same harsh light toward ourselves. This is where Stoicism becomes uncomfortable and necessary. It forces us to look inward without filters. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So ask yourself, if your thoughts are shaped by fear, distrust, or emotional neediness, what color is your soul right now? When you feel the urge to constantly know where your partner is, when you crave reassurance, when silence feels like abandonment, that isn't love. It's emotional imprisonment. You're not nurturing the relationship. You're feeding a fear that's eating away at your peace. Stoicism teaches that nothing external can truly be controlled. Not events, not time, not even people. And the more we try to grip what is beyond our control, the more we suffer. We become hostages to expectations, slaves to the reactions of others, and ultimately, we hand over the key to our happiness. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control the person you love, the more you imprison yourself. You spend your energy monitoring, overthinking, chasing answers, and trying to prevent something that may never happen. That's not love. That's anxiety dressed in romance. And the other person feels it, even if they don't say it. The tension, the pressure, the constant need to be enough for you, it weighs on them. What should be connection turns into suffocation. What was once affection becomes resistance. The Stoic response? If it's not within your control, it's not your responsibility. But accepting this truth takes courage. Because it's easier to blame the other than to confront your own wounds. Easier to point the finger than to stand in front of the mirror. This first step is not about guilt. It's about awareness. Recognizing the prison, not outside, but within. And even more importantly, realizing that you built it. And you can also unlock the door. What really happens inside of us when we fear losing someone? Is it about the person, or the idea of being left behind, forgotten, or not being enough? The fear of loss is one of the deepest and most universal human experiences. And yet, we rarely question its root. Stoicism invites us to do exactly that. Epictetus taught, "It's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." When we imagine losing someone we love, it's not the event itself that breaks us. It's the story we attach to it. I'll be alone. I won't be chosen again. I must not be worthy. I'll never find someone like them. From this fear, we begin to grasp for control, trying to prevent the loss before it even happens. We start needing updates, explanations, justifications. We ask where they are, who they're with, why they didn't respond faster, why the tone of their voice changed. We tell ourselves this is care, but it's not. It's fear disguised as concern. It's anxiety dressed up like love. But here's the irony. The more we try to control, the more we push away what we're trying to protect. The person begins to feel monitored, not loved, bound, not free, suffocated, not safe. And slowly, the relationship stops being a place of growth and becomes a cage. Trying to control someone in the name of love will never bring peace. It only fuels the fear you were trying to escape. You end up building the very reality you feared most. Stoicism offers a liberating perspective. Accept impermanence. Everything outside your mind, people, emotions, even love, can change. And trying to grasp them too tightly is like holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more you lose. But that doesn't mean love has to be weak or cold. In fact, it becomes stronger when it's free. When you love from a place of inner security, you stop demanding certainty from the other person. You trust that if they stay, it's by choice, not obligation. And if they leave, you don't collapse. Because you've built something unshakable inside yourself. This doesn't come from detachment, it comes from depth. From knowing that no matter what happens, you are whole. And that your peace doesn't live in someone else's hands. That's the beginning of true love. One that doesn't control and doesn't fear being free. Have you ever confused love with vigilance? Thought that truly loving someone meant knowing everything they do, being constantly available, anticipating their every need, and eliminating all threats, real or imagined? If so, you're not alone. In today's culture, this confusion is not only common, it's often romanticized. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Much of what we call care is actually control. And much of what we call being present is actually fear of being left. Stoicism challenges us to re-examine the motivations behind our actions. True love, according to Stoic philosophy, is born from freedom and virtue, not from fear and dependency. Love means allowing the other to exist as they are, not as our insecurity wants them to be. It's not about knowing every detail of their life. It's about trusting them and trusting yourself to handle whatever may come. Yet when love turns into surveillance, it creates habits that seem normal but are quietly toxic. Checking their phone, asking for passwords, needing constant reassurance, interpreting silence as rejection, reading too deeply into a tone of voice. These behaviors might feel like emotional protection, but they erode trust. They transform affection into pressure, connection into anxiety. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And if your thoughts are built on fear, suspicion, and expectation, what kind of love are you really offering? Because whether you realize it or not, emotional pressure is felt. Even when it's silent, even when it comes from a place of love. The confusion between care and control is one of the most damaging illusions in modern relationships because it's often defended by noble intentions. I just care too much, or I act this way because I've been hurt before. But fear, no matter how well-intentioned, still binds. The Stoic path calls for self-control, not the control of others. That means choosing presence over pressure, listening instead of accusing, trusting instead of chasing reassurance, and above all, giving the other person the freedom to stay or leave by choice, Because the greatest act of love is freedom. Not freedom from commitment, but freedom from fear. Freedom to breathe, to grow, and to choose each other. Not out of need, but out of mutual respect. When you love someone and still choose to let them be, that's not weakness, that's strength. That's Stoic love. Jealousy is one of those emotions we rarely admit out loud. We downplay it, rationalize it, even romanticize it, calling it just a sign that we care. But what is jealousy really? It's the fear of being replaced, the fear of not being good enough. It's the terror of discovering that someone else might be more lovable than you. And that fear often comes from a wound we've never fully addressed. For Stoics, jealousy isn't a sign of love. It's a signal of attachment to what we don't control. It reveals that our sense of worth still depends on someone else's attention or affection. It shows us that we're measuring our value through comparison, and comparison is a trap. Seneca said, "What lies ahead is always uncertain. Live, therefore, with courage." And courage, in this context, means allowing the person you love to exist freely, even if that freedom feels threatening to your ego. The problem is, when you're ruled by jealousy, everything feels like a threat. A glance, a laugh, a delay in response, a vague story. Anything can trigger the mind to spiral. You start playing detective, overanalyzing, comparing, and worst of all, distrusting. Not necessarily because the other person did something wrong, but because your internal security is fragile. And from that insecurity, destructive patterns emerge. Passive-aggressive comments, emotional blackmail, guilt-tripping, and constant need for reassurance. These aren't signs of love, they're signs of emotional instability being projected outward. Stoicism teaches us to reclaim our inner stability, to stop expecting external validation to calm internal storms. A truly Stoic love begins when you stop looking at your partner as the source of your self-worth and start cultivating value from within. That doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. On the contrary, it means showing up with clarity and presence instead of fear. It means choosing to love without needing to control, without needing to compare, and without needing to constantly prove you are enough. Jealousy dissolves when you stop seeing yourself through the eyes of others. It fades when you trust that your worth is not negotiable, not even in love. When you love from a place of strength, not scarcity, you stop asking, "Will they leave?" and start asking, "Am I loving with integrity?" That's when you go from fear to freedom, from control to connection, from jealousy to genuine love. Sometimes we tell ourselves we're protecting the relationship, that we're just trying to make it work, fix the dynamic, or prevent another heartbreak. But beneath those stories, there's often a more honest and more painful truth. We're trying to escape our own emotional emptiness. Control, in many relationships, is not about power, it's about fear. It's about trying to manage the external world because the internal one feels too uncertain. And deep down, we hope that if we can just keep the other person close enough, predictable enough, loving enough, we won't have to face the silence inside us. Stoicism disrupts this illusion by turning our attention inward. Epictetus famously said, "As long as you worry about what others are doing, you'll never be free." And he meant it, because if your peace depends on someone else's words, behaviors, or presence, then your peace is not real. It's rented, conditional, vulnerable to collapse at any moment. That kind of dependence often comes from old wounds, abandonment, rejection, emotional neglect. Maybe no one ever taught you how to feel safe alone. Maybe love was something you had to earn, and now subconsciously you keep chasing it, managing it, holding on to it, like it's your only lifeline. But here's the truth. No one else can fill a hole that was built by your past. No amount of affection, attention, or validation will make you feel whole if you haven't first met yourself. And yet, when that inner void goes unexamined, it quietly takes the wheel. It drives your need to monitor, to demand, to fix, to change the other person, not out of malice, but out of survival. The Stoic solution is not to become indifferent, but to become whole. To build a solid foundation within, so that love becomes a gift, not a tool for self-soothing. When you cultivate your own center of gravity, you stop outsourcing your stability. You stop needing the other person to act a certain way in order for you to feel okay. And something powerful happens. The need to control dissolves. Not because the risk is gone, but because your sense of self no longer depends on what the other does. You no longer need constant reassurance, immediate replies, or perfect behavior. You've stopped trying to manage your fear through someone else's choices. That's what Stoic love looks like. Not cold, but clear. Not distant, but grounded. A love that says, I choose you, but I don't need to control you to feel safe with myself. That's not weakness. That's emotional freedom. Have you ever felt angry or disappointed when the person you love didn't act the way you expected? Maybe they didn't respond the right way, didn't say what you needed to hear, didn't read your mind or comfort you at the perfect moment. It's easy to say you just wanted understanding, but sometimes what we really wanted was control. In truth, many of our relationship struggles come not from who the other person is, but from who we want them to be. We project an internal ideal onto them, shaped by our needs, insecurities, and fears. When they match it, we feel safe. When they deviate from it, we feel abandoned, not necessarily because of what they did, but because it confronts our illusion. This is what Stoicism exposes, the tension between what is and what we demand. Seneca once wrote, "It is a mistake to expect from others what you will not provide yourself." When we expect others to be our constant emotional anchors, without first anchoring ourselves, we place a burden on them they were never meant to carry. Love becomes conditional, a performance, a silent agreement. I'll love you as long as you keep playing the role I cast you in. And what happens when they stop? When they set boundaries, change, pull back, or fail to meet your unspoken expectations? You feel hurt, not necessarily because they harmed you, but because they no longer fit the version of them you invented. Your ego feels betrayed. From there, manipulation can sneak in. Subtle criticism, emotional pressure, passive-aggressive comments, even guilt-tripping. These are not signs of deep love. They're symptoms of an ego terrified of not being enough, terrified of not being in control. Stoicism proposes a different path, one of radical acceptance and emotional clarity. You are not here to mold others into your safety net. You are here to know yourself deeply and let others be who they are. Love isn't about turning someone into your mirror. It's about witnessing and respecting their autonomy. This doesn't mean giving up on communication or emotional needs. It means expressing them without pressure, without control, without requiring the other to change in order for you to feel loved. A mature love says, I will tell you how I feel, but I won't punish you for being yourself. I will express what I need, but I won't demand you sacrifice your truth to meet it. Because if someone loves you freely, that love is real. If they only stay because you've sculpted them into who your ego needs, you're not loved. You're obeyed. The Stoic challenge is to stop using others as emotional mirrors and start using life as a mirror to see yourself. That's when love becomes liberating, not limiting. Honest, not forced. And finally, real. One of the most common and most dangerous myths we carry is this: if I'm loved, I'll finally feel complete. It sounds beautiful. But beneath the surface, it can become a trap. Because when your sense of worth depends on being loved by someone else, love stops being a gift and becomes a necessity, a condition for your survival. We all want to be loved. That's human. But when that desire becomes a need, your freedom begins to fade. You start adjusting yourself constantly, your voice, your needs, your truth, just to be accepted, approved, chosen. You hide parts of yourself. You walk on eggshells. You say yes when you mean no, all out of fear. If I'm too much, too distant, too emotional, they might leave. And so, in trying not to lose them, you lose yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This includes the event of being loved. It means that no one, no matter how much they care for you, can give you what you refuse to give yourself. When your identity is built on being loved, every silence becomes a threat. Every absence feels like abandonment. You begin to read between lines, obsess over small signs, question your worth over the slightest change. You're not just in a relationship, you're surviving it. Stoicism teaches us that true emotional freedom begins when you realize you are already whole. Love can add to your life, but it cannot be your life source. You don't need to be chosen to exist. You already exist. And if someone loves you, great. If they leave, you're still standing. This shift is not about coldness, it's about strength. When you stop needing someone to love you so you can feel worthy, you start loving more freely. You stop controlling, performing, or overgiving just to be needed. You become more honest, more calm, more real. And ironically, this kind of love is the most magnetic. Because it's grounded, it doesn't demand, it doesn't beg. It allows both people to breathe, and that is where true intimacy begins. You are not a reflection of who loves you. You are a reflection of how deeply you've learned to love and stay with yourself. Few things trigger our emotional core like the fear of being left. Sometimes it screams. Sometimes it whispers through small behaviors, over-explaining, people-pleasing, avoiding conflict, silencing our needs just to keep the peace. But the cost of that peace is often our own authenticity. Many of us walk through relationships terrified of being too much, too intense, too emotional, too difficult to love. So we shrink, we shape-shift, we perform, and in doing so, we abandon ourselves, just to avoid being abandoned by someone else. But here's the paradox. The more we betray who we are in order to be loved, the less we feel loved. Because deep down, we know they don't love us. They love the version we've created to protect ourselves. That's not love. That's survival. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you can leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. It's a powerful call to presence, to show up as who you are, not as who you think others want you to be. To stop living in fear of being left, and start living in alignment with your truth. The Stoic approach to abandonment is not denial, it's courage. It's standing tall even when the ground feels unstable. It's recognizing that if someone walks away from you while you're being authentic, it's not a loss, it's clarity. And if they stay, it's because the connection is real. When the fear of abandonment controls your love life, every relationship becomes a test. You're always scanning for signs, reading between the lines, overanalyzing moments. You're not connecting, you're calculating. You're not loving, you're managing. But when you no longer fear being left, you start showing up fully. You express your needs without fear. You voice your boundaries without guilt. You let silence be silence, not a punishment. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. This shift is revolutionary. Because it teaches you to be faithful to yourself, even if it means disappointing others. That's not selfishness, that's integrity. That's strength. And that's the foundation of all healthy love. Not I'll do anything so you don't leave me, but I will be myself and trust that what's meant for me will stay. Emotional manipulation doesn't always come in the form of threats or outbursts. Sometimes it hides in soft words with sharp edges, in silences that punish, in carefully crafted guilt. It can sound like, after everything I've done for you, or, if you really loved me, you'd understand. It's subtle, it's quiet, and often it's unconscious, rooted not in cruelty, but in fear. And that's what makes it so dangerous. When you fear losing someone and don't know how to handle that fear internally, you may start trying to control the other person emotionally. Not through force, but through pressure, through shame, through guilt. You might start keeping score, withholding affection, using your pain as a weapon, not to harm, but to get a reaction. And here's the painful truth. That's not love. That's survival mode wearing a romantic mask. Stoicism calls for radical self-responsibility. Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart, even in hardship." This doesn't mean suppressing your pain, but it does mean refusing to manipulate with it. It means expressing your needs clearly, without expecting the other person to rescue you. It means owning your emotions, not outsourcing them as tools to influence someone else's behavior. When you manipulate, even unconsciously, you're telling yourself that honest communication isn't enough. That love, as it is, won't hold unless you control it. But love held by guilt is not love, it's coercion. And sooner or later, it breaks. What if, instead of managing people through emotional pressure, you chose to trust? To trust that you can speak your truth without needing to bend someone else's will. To trust that love, if it's real, doesn't need to be bought, forced, or staged. It just needs to be chosen, freely. The Stoic path offers this freedom. It teaches us to stop managing others and start managing ourselves. To replace manipulation with clarity, guilt with boundaries, fear with virtue. This is where real love lives, in the space where both people are free to choose and still choose each other. No tricks, no games, no manipulation. Just truth, integrity, and emotional freedom. Throughout this journey, you may have recognized something uncomfortable. That the fear, the control, the insecurity, all of it, wasn't just coming from the outside. It was inside you. And that, in many moments of your life, you were both the one imprisoned and the one holding the key. You were the prisoner, living in fear of being abandoned, unloved, or replaced. But you were also the jailer, restricting the freedom of others to soothe your own anxiety. Controlling, watching, demanding, all in the name of love. But now you see it for what it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." And Stoicism invites you to dig deep, to turn your gaze inward. Because the source of your freedom is not in changing the other person. It's in reclaiming yourself. This shift is radical. It means letting go of the comfort of blame. It means no longer using your wounds as reasons to harm or control. It means loving with your eyes open, without fear, without illusions, without needing to possess. You don't need to chase or beg to be loved. You don't need to bend yourself in half to keep someone close. You don't need to manipulate, monitor, or mold anyone to feel safe. Instead, you build your foundation from within. You develop virtue, clarity, self-control, courage, integrity, and you let that be your anchor, your compass, your peace. From this place, your love becomes powerful, not because it dominates, but because it liberates. You no longer try to make someone stay. You simply make it safe for them to be real. And if they walk away, you don't collapse. You stand with dignity. Because the greatest freedom is not being loved by someone else. It's being free from needing that love to survive. That is what Stoicism offers you. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of strength. Not the illusion of control, but the mastery of self. And now that you've seen how fear can turn love into a cage, you're ready for the next step. What happens when you're not just trying to control others, but also yourself? When the prison isn't outside, but inside your own mind? In the next episode, we'll go even deeper. The invisible ways we sabotage our own freedom. How rigid self-image, perfectionism, and unprocessed pain keep us trapped inside ourselves. And how Stoicism can guide you to true internal liberation. Now you know. Love that imprisons isn't love, it's fear disguised as care. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're ready for the next step. Because it's not just about freeing yourself from someone else's control. It's about recognizing when you are the one trying to control. When you demand, when you manipulate, when you tighten your grip, often without realizing. And in the next episode, we go even deeper. What happens when you become both the prisoner and the jailer? When fear of loss turns into control? When jealousy takes over? When insecurity shows up as emotional demands? Get ready to look in the mirror with honesty. Because Stoicism isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about transforming yourself. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe to keep walking this Stoic journey with more clarity, freedom, and peace of mind.